What if one of the most important teachings of Jesus never made it into the Bible? Not because it was false, not because it was dangerous, but because it completely changed where people would eventually look for truth. Because buried in the Egyptian desert, alongside the secret book of John, was another ancient text. A text containing 114 sayings attributed to Jesus. No crucifixion story, no resurrection story, just teachings. And some of those teachings are so strange, so profound, that scholars, mystics, psychologists, and spiritual seekers are still debating about them today. But one saying stands above all of the others. A statement that may completely change how you understand spirituality, how you understand consciousness. The kingdom of God is within you. But what if we've never really understood what that means? Imagine a man standing before a crowd. Some are poor, some are wealthy, some are religious, some are skeptical, some are searching for answers. And instead of telling them where to find God, he tells them where not to look. Not in the temples, not in the mountains, not in the institutions, not in status, not in power, not even in another person. Instead, he says, the kingdom is inside of you and outside of you. Think about how strange that is. Because almost every system in human history points outward. Politics points outward. Advertising points outward. Status points outward. Even much of religion points outward. Yet, Jesus pointed inward. Why? What if humanity's oldest problem isn't sin? What if it's distraction? Think about the modern life. We're constantly searching. We're searching for happiness. We're searching for validation, for purpose. We're searching for the next thing that will finally make us feel complete. And yet, the more that we consume, the emptier many people seem to become. We're trying to satisfy an internal problem with external solutions. And the ancient Greeks noticed this too. Inscribed in the temple of Delphi, there were two words: know thyself. Not conquer the world, not accumulate wealth, know thyself. Thousands of years later, Jesus appears to be pointing toward the same exact mystery. Imagine spending your entire life searching for treasure. You travel continents, you cross oceans, you climb mountains, you read every book, you follow every teacher, only to discover that the treasure was buried beneath your own home this entire time. This story repeats throughout cultures all over the world. Why? Because it reflects something fundamental about human nature. The thing we seek most desperately, so close, we overlook it. Consciousness itself, awareness itself, the observer behind every thought, the witness behind every emotion, the presence that has been with you your entire life. Fast forward nearly 2,000 years later. A psychologist named Carl Jung begins studying dreams, symbols, religion, mythology. And after decades of his research, he arrives at one shocking conclusion. Human beings do not truly know themselves. Most people identify with what Jung called the persona, the mask. This is the socially acceptable version of themselves. The version shown to family, friends, co-workers, social media. But behind the mask, something deeper exists. There's a larger self, a more complete self. And Jung believed The purpose of life was becoming conscious of it. Not becoming someone new, but becoming who you already are. Sound familiar? One of the strangest sayings in Thomas says, if your eye becomes single, your whole body will be filled with light. Most people hear that and move on. But what does it mean? Think about your mind. Most people live divided. One part wants security, another wants freedom. One part wants change, another fears change. One part seeks truth, another part seeks comfort. The result? Inner conflict, constant noise. But what happens when your attention becomes unified? What happens when awareness stops pulling in 100 directions? Perhaps that's what Jesus meant by a single eye. Not a physical eye, a unified, integrated consciousness. A mind no longer fragmented. Another famous saying is, when you make the two one, what does this mean? Mystics have debated this for centuries, and some believe that it referred to the masculine and the feminine energies. Others believe that it referred to the spirit and matter. And Jung might say the conscious and the unconscious. The Taoists call it yin and yang. The alchemists call it union. You see, it's a different language, but it's the same pattern, wholeness. Because suffering often comes from division. Healing comes from integration. Now, almost every major tradition speaks about inner light. Jesus, Buddha, the Upanishads, mystics, Sufis, Hermetic philosophers, again and again, this same idea appears. Not because cultures copied each other, but because they were observing the same thing, human consciousness. The Gospel of Thomas says, there is light within a person of light. Think about that. Not a light outside, within. Now here's the controversial question. What if Jesus wasn't merely teaching morality? What if he was teaching awareness itself? Because almost every saying in Thomas points toward perception, observation, self-knowledge, inner transformation, self-mastery, not blind belief. Direct knowing. Now, most people think Genesis is a story about the beginning of the world. But what if Genesis is happening every morning? Every day consciousness awakens. Every day identity is recreated. Every day you choose who you will be. Will awareness rule your life or conditioning? Will fear guide your decisions or wisdom? Every morning is Genesis. Every day is creation. Now here is where things become controversial. Okay, many mystics throughout history have interpreted Christ not merely as a historical figure, but as a state of consciousness. Okay, not Jesus the man, but Christ the principle, the awakened self, the divine image within humanity, the realization that kingdom was never somewhere else. It was always within. And no, this doesn't diminish Jesus. If anything, it magnifies the significance of his message. Now, Carl Jung believed that most people spend their lives identified with a mask, a persona. But beneath that mask lies the shadow, the hidden self, the rejected self, the unconscious self. And awakening begins when a person becomes willing to face what they have spent years avoiding. Could this be what Jesus meant when he said, bring forth what is within you and it will save you? Now, many people misunderstand tarot and astrology. At their deepest level, these are not merely systems of prediction. They are maps of archetypes. The Fool represents the beginning of the journey. The Hermit represents self-knowledge. The Death card represents transformation. The devil represents attachments and illusions. The world represents integration. Likewise, the zodiac can be viewed as symbolic forces within human consciousness. Scorpio teaches transformation. Leo teaches identity. Pisces teaches transcendence. These are not merely signs, they are mirrors. The Hermetic tradition teaches as above, so below, as within, so without. Modern neuroscience has discovered something fascinating. Human beings do not experience reality directly. They experience their interpretation of reality, meaning that your inner world shapes your outer experience. This doesn't mean reality isn't real. It means that perception matters more than what people realize. Now, we live in a culture that's obsessed with external identity: followers, status, labels, politics, appearance, performance. Again, many people know everything about celebrities, yet almost nothing about themselves. And perhaps this is why anxiety continues rising, because people are building identities without building self-awareness. Awakening is not becoming someone else. Awakening is remembering. Remembering who you were before fear, before conditioning, before performance, before survival mode became your personality. And maybe that's why the kingdom cannot be found externally, because what is already within cannot be discovered through accumulation, only through remembrance. Now, tomorrow morning, before you touch your phone, ask yourself, what thoughts are truly mine? What fears were inherited? What identity am I recreating today? And who would I be if I remembered who I really am? Because perhaps the greatest secret hidden within ancient texts, philosophy, psychology, mysticism, and even the teachings of Jesus is the same exact truth that keeps appearing. Different cultures, different languages, different symbols, but the same exact message. Know thyself, because the kingdom you seek has never been somewhere else. It has been waiting within you this entire time. And if this message found you today, it wasn't because you needed more information. It was because you just needed a reminder. Out of love, I hope you awaken to the truth of who you are. Be the light, be the change, and remember, what begins in the spiritual world eventually crystallizes in the physical. The kingdom is within.